Alright, today I'm going to get into the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, I've most likely said before, the only thing you really would need is the player's handbook, because like in the back, like I've showed, it has like a bunch of monster stats, and like you can use your own imagination and everything to build your own worlds, or like maybe you can just like pull up like a map of like a pre-made campaign set, like the go-to like a flagship campaign setting for D&D is the Forgotten Realms. So like the player's handbook is pretty much the only thing you need. Now, with this being optional, this is like being one of what's considered a core rulebook. This is would be a valuable pickup for a dungeon master. So like with the D&D and any role playing game, you need like at least two people to play. One to be the dungeon master, and a second to be like a player. Now, the more people that you bring in, the better. I mean, like, if you're bringing in like 10, 15 players, it kind of gets. You might find that it gets a little too big. So like a lot of times, like the perfect setting for like a players would be like 4 to 6. Now, if you have like 7 or 8 players, you can still be quite effective as well. So, but most parties usually are like a 4 to 6 player characters. So, like you're looking at like at least 5 to 7 people, with the fifth or the seventh person being the dungeon master. So, like with this book, it's like gets more in depth. So, like it has like you can see part one, part two, and in like the index, this is the index part three. It has like a few appendixes that you can get into. So like we'll go over each part. So like part one is pretty much like creating your own world and everything. So like you can pretty much end up pulling a Tolkien and create your own Middle Earth, or you could be like the author Terry Brooks and build out the world of Shannara, or your own that type of deal, or like what you can do, like I've mentioned, like the Forgotten Realms. You can like pick up like a source book or something on that if you don't want to do all the legwork of creating your own world. So like what you'll as a DM, what you'll find like you'll probably find like what works best for you. So like if you're just starting out, you don't want to do necessarily all the legwork. You just want like a something quick and easy that you can jump into, then get like a pre set campaign set in like the Forgotten Realms, or like Eberron's another one. And there's Greyhawk, and like there's of course Dragonlance. So like this part pretty much gets into like the world creation. So like uh, for instance, like creating your world, it has some like examples of Dawn War deities that you can use for like for your religion, for like the cleric class that you in the clerics and druids. So like it goes in depth like on that, plus like on like the humanoids, sort of like the orcs, the goblins, the hobgoblins, the bugbears, stuff like that. So like it also gives you like as you go through like the pages, it gives you like paragraphs and like whole chapters on like how to build like towns, the government that like run towns, or like the actual nations, like whether it's like a democracy, a theocracy, or like a monarch, which is like usually like quite often the common one in like campaign set, like fantasy campaign settings like D&D. So like it also gets into like the different currencies, and like explains like the gold pieces, the silver pieces, and like gives you like a sample factions that you can use. So like the like the one here it gives is the Harpers from like the Forgotten Realms. So like if you've seen the recent D&D movie, like Chris Pine's character was a part of that organization, the Harpers. So like and it goes into like optional stuff you can use, like renown, like how well your character is known, type of deal. And like it also goes into like magic, like how powerful like is magic. Is it like the world shattering stuff like you see in the movie, or like you see in like fantasy books that you read, like Dragonlance, or like is it kind of low end, sort of like what you see in like Lord of the Rings, where it's not necessarily as planet busting as in the other campaign settings I've just explained. And so it also gives you ideas for like events, like you can run your players through simple ones, world shaking events, like big major ones that would change the world type of deal, and it goes into stuff that's like cataclysmic events like earthquakes and wars, and this is pretty much like the first part of the DM guide. And of course it also gives example on a type of calendar you could use, or you could always just make it simple and use the one that we use, the Gregorian calendar. So and it also goes into the play style, is it like hack and slash where you're just rolling a bunch of dice and doing like fighting monsters and everything, or are you actually sitting there becoming in-depth role playing where you run the actual movie type of deal, or what is most often the case, it's somewhere in between where you have a combination of combat where you're sitting there hacking and slashing, and then you have chances to take a step back and actually role playing and immerse yourself into it and everything. So and then it gives the description of the tiers of play, with the character creation that I went over. You have the levels, when you're first starting out, you're a low level, so you're just pretty much starting out on your adventure, versus the high levels up to level 20, where you're pretty much known throughout the world type of deal. So it gives an example of how you level up, and play style through how you level up and everything. So it goes through it gives different types, examples of what type of fantasy you would be playing, also now getting into the second chapter of this, this is where it actually explains the planes, the multiverse, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Whereas pretty much most of your campaign would happen on what's known as the material plane, whereas this is the plane, the world, where pretty much people like you and I would interact, and that's what's the material plane. And then of course it also this gets into the other planes, where the gods would exist, or for instance the astral plane, which would let you travel in between the planes. And then of course you got the planes, the nine hells they call, where all the demons reside, and you got the abyss where devils reside. So you got negative planes like that, and you got positive planes like heaven and Mount Olympus. And so you can draw just about inspiration from anything. And of course they also got as you can see here, elemental planes, like the plane of earth, fire, wind, and water. And of course it gives a nice little description on how you would traverse from the material plane to the different the elemental planes, and gives descriptions on those. So like I said, you can have just about any type of the realms that we could think of from our mythologies and stuff. So and that this is what the chapter 2 for this first part goes through, is the different types of planes that you can do if, for instance, you want to start expanding to beyond the typical material plane, or going beyond the world itself. So now part 2 right here is pretty much all about adventure. And so for instance, what type of adventure are you playing? Are you doing what's called a dungeon crawl, where you're just delving into dungeons and everything, searching for treasure? Or are you traversing the world, going from the southern seas to the northern frozen wastelands type of deal? So this whole section gives ideas on the types of adventures. You can also do event based, like for instance, like the king gets overthrown in like the local kingdom, so that would be like something that would be like event based. So like it gives like a whole description of how you frame it, and so this pretty much would go into like a in depth on how to run like the adventures and counters for this whole section. So like this is why like stuff like this would be like a good idea, even though it would be optional. It's a good idea to get this, so that way you get more ideas to work with, and so you can expand upon adventures and everything. So like and it gives the different type types of like in here it has like a table like the forest encounters that you like maybe you run across some of the like wildlife or something while you're trying to chase down like the assassin of that king that was just murdered, that like an example I used. So and then in here in the next chapter for the part 2, it also gets into creating what are known as NPCs, the non-player characters. So like you got your PCs, which are your player characters. So like your 4 friends, say you get them to come in and play. They each run a character which is known as a player character that they control. The non-player characters are, as the DM, are the ones that you control. So like for instance, like you would pretty much like the main NPC would be like that you would play would be known as the BBEG, the big bad evil guy. So that's pretty much like would be like the major NPC, but like NPCs also include like people that like the player characters or PCs would run into. So like basically like the bartender at the local tavern, like the duke at like in the town who is loyal to the king type deal would be another example of an NPC, or it could be like as simple as like people that they run into across the street through the street of like the city that they're running through type of deal. So like this goes into depth like on like the type of NPCs you can like run, and like it gives you ideas on how to like write them up as characters. And like also like you can see here it talks about followers. So like maybe you get like a friend that would be willing to follow you on your adventures and everything. So like yeah, it gives you ideas on that. And like you can also like here it gives you ideas on how to hire people, which are called hirelings. And like it gives the tables on like on how to do like different types of villains. So while this is like I keep mentioning is optional, it is considered a core rule book, and gives like you the DM a lot of ideas and like options, and expands upon your game that you can use to better enhance the playing experience that people will have. So like it also gets into this next chapter, as you can see, adventure environments. So like whether you're in like a dungeon, or like you go through like a forest, or like a desert, or like you go through like the frozen tundra. And so it gives you like ideas like for instance like the dungeons, it gives you like ideas for like hazards, encounters, and like pretty much that goes further in depth. And like so like for instance it has like a section on like the wilderness that I mentioned. So like you could go through like for instance like through like a forest, a desert, frozen tundra examples that I keep using. So like it gives you ideas on like how to do this stuff like this. And like it builds into like the like sort of like dungeon hazards. It gives you wilderness hazards, like basically stuff that you would come across in like the adventures, not just like lollygagging in that running into like running through stuff scot-free type of deal. Like you actually have like different types of like snares that you could run into that could set your party back. And so like it gives like also tables on like the settlements that like for towns and like cities, and like basically where you would start interacting with a lot of the NPCs or non-player characters. So and like it has like a good artwork of like a illustration of how a town would be set up type of deal. So like and with this part gets into like the urban encounters, so like versus which would be like same concept of wilderness encounters, just in like an urban city setting type of deal. So like this is how like this book would, like I said, give you a lot more options and ideas and everything, and enhance your ability as the dungeon master to be able to run the game. So like and then it moves on after the encounters into chapter 6, or getting into like the time between adventures. So like say like using the king was assassinated type of deal, you go on the adventure to track down the assassin, and you do that and you come back, and then like maybe like in between that and then you find the duke for your next adventure, and he sends you off to find like the king's long lost son, to be able to bring him in and like set him up on the throne type of deal. So like this will get like kind of like ideas of what to do between the adventures that your characters will be running through. So like it gives like tables and stuff like to in a sense flesh out details of like towns, like this one is like a stronghold that like would be like a castle that that king was at. And so like this gives you stuff like to kind of like flesh out like the like encounters that like people your PCs or players would run through. And then like it gets into like the next chapter, chapter 7, treasure. So like treasure can be like just about anything. Like it can be like you can see here like gemstones that like people are that your PCs are able to pull out of like a treasure chest in a dungeon, or it can be like gold pieces and like or it can be like magical items type of deal. Like someone picks up like a magic swords, or like using War of the Rings, like Bilbo getting the magic dagger, what he calls Sting. That would be like an idea of like a magic weapon that someone is able to get for treasure. So it gives like tables that like, you can use as DM to like kind of flesh out like what kind of like items that like people would be getting per encounter type of deal. So like if you don't necessarily know what to give them off the top of your head or something, or like what would be a good idea to give them, this gives tables on like so you can use to kind of like, okay, well I'm not sure what to give them, so I'll use like these tables in here to kind of like flush out like rolling on like a percentage dice, like using 2d10 to like roll for a percentage to find out like what they get and everything. So like this chapter like deals with like the, like I said, the treasures, like the non-magic items, like your gold coins, your gems, and like stuff people can use to barter and trade for like the mundane like adventure items, so like crowbars, backpacks, and food and stuff like that. And it also gets into like it has like different tables for different types of magical items. And so like this definitely goes into like after these tables, it really goes into depth on like the different types of like magic items you can get. So like you can see here like pictures of armor. So like people can get magic armor that increases their AC, their armor class. And like of course you can also get like a magical axe, or like bags or belts that increase like ability scores. Like one of the famous belts would probably be like for instance in Nordic mythology, Thor has like a belt and a pair of gloves that enhances his strength and everything. So that's why he was considered so strong. So like that would be like an example of like a magic belt and gloves that like a character could get. Like, and so like magic items can be like anything from like a cauldron to boots that let them go faster, to like run faster, to cloaks that let them maybe become invisible. So like the ideas of like different types of like magic items that you can get are pretty much endless, and they give like a ton of different like descriptions on all the magic items that they created here in the Dungeon Master Guide. So like they have like dozens of pages on like the different types of magic items that you can get, and you can even get like different magical books that maybe like let wizards like increase their spellcasting ability. So like the types of magical items that you can get are pretty much like endless, and you can in a sense create your own, so you don't necessarily have to use this book to just like grab like in a sense copy and paste magical items, but it is a very good like resource to use, so like you don't necessarily have to create your own, but like if you are the creative type and you want to create your own magical items, you can do that. So like this next part is pretty much like gets into like running the game. So like you get like for instance like table talk, but for instance like the table talk would be like where you get into character and like you're talking as a, like your characters, and you have that like a back and forth banter or whatever. And of course they talk about what's known as metagame thinking. So like I myself would be start thinking like, well, hey, like I know the DM wouldn't necessarily put like a door here that would go nowhere, so I'm going to like assume that that door goes somewhere. That would be metagame thinking. Whereas like as a player, you might think like, well, that door might walk right into like be like in a sense plastered off with like a bunch of bricks and stuff. So like as a player, you might not necessarily know that. That would be an example like of a metagame thinking, where you're thinking as yourself and not necessarily as your character. So that's like that could be a big issue, or like you could it all depends on like how you play with your friends and everything. So like it gets into like rolling dice, like for instance like rolling dice for like things like attacks, for saving throws, and like it gets into like ability checks here, like the whole like dice throwing that you get into with doing all the checks and like attacks and stuff that I just mentioned. So it also gets further into like things like exploration. It talks about like the travel pace. So, like you could in a sense get more in depth. So like you can get as in depth or as little in depth as you want to using this book and everything. So like this section, it just gives you more ideas on like how like better to run like and like in this page it gives like a good example of like the size difference. Like you can see right here, that's like what most characters are going to be like, is what they consider medium size, and they get into different sizes like large, like huge, and then you can see gargantuan. Like over here you can see like what we call the small character, and like a tiny character like the fairies or something. So like it gets more this part pretty much gets into depth on like the whole mechanics, much more in depth on the mechanics of the game. So like you can see like how the line of sight for like people like using like bows and arrows gives an example here on like how people can attack and flank someone. So it gives examples on how to run in a sense combat, and like what you can like do like run into like situations for like like yeah like for not being able to like shoot someone that behind cover with like a bow and arrow type of deal. So like that this last part pretty much is like getting more in depth in like the nuances of the game. So like that pretty much is how it like ends this book. So like it also like gives you an idea on like experience points, like what you need to level up for like an instance, like going back to before like the low level play up to all the way to high level play. Like low level play would be like the first 4 or 5 levels. High level play would be like you get up to like level 17 to 20. So like, this talks about the experience points and like how you would assess experience points, and how you'd handle leveling up, like maybe going from level 1 to 2 all the way up to level 20. So then like this is one like the last chapter is like a workshop that like in a sense like goes even further in depth into like different options. Like it gives you like an option of doing honor and sanity. Like maybe you're running like a horror campaign with like a sort of like Curse of Strahd would be like a good example of like a horror campaign. So like you have like an ability score of sanity where like people are seeing horrors of like what the vampire Strahd is doing, and like the character may not be able to handle as much as someone else. So you might have like the optional ability of sanity. So like the more like death and destruction they see, or like sort of like the PTSD type of deal, like would be a real world example of how sanity would work in like a setting like that. So like that's an optional ability you could use. So like and like of course it goes further in depth into like other options that you use into like further your adventure and like depth and play of the actual campaign that you'd be running. So like this is why like DM Guide, while not essential to play, would be a valuable addition to the Dungeon Master. So that way you have a lot more options at your disposal. So that way you can like if for some like something like out of the ordinary pops up, you can be like, oh yeah, I remember reading about this in the DM guide. So like you're able to better like go with the flow and like create more like lasting memorable adventures that your PCs will be more likely to come back to and everything. So like and like I'll reiterate that while it's not essential, and it's an optional book and everything, it would definitely be a valuable resource for the person who takes on the role of the dungeon master. So like yeah, like now not everyone's going to be the DM. So like of course they have the old adage that you always have the what's called the forever DM, the person that's forever playing the role of the DM, and the rest are the players. Or you could have like a rotation of people, like your group could like rotate roles. Like maybe you run like a campaign, the Curse of Strahd that I mentioned. Like one person could DM that, you rotate out, and then the next person does like another adventure module. Like maybe you run like Dragonlance campaign, like the Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Someone else steps in to be DM for that, so that way the first DM that ran Curse of Strahd can become a player. And so like they got like in back here, as you can see as I'm flipping through, they got a bunch of indexes for like a lot of like miscellaneous stuff, like furnishings for places. It's like got like utensils and like stuff that you can use to kind of like flesh out buildings and stuff that like they'll come around. And so like these are like appendices. Like it gives you like you can see here, a monster list that like the player characters can run into. So like the player's handbook does have some of the monsters that you'll be running into. So like that is perfect for starting out and everything. So like next week when I go into the monster manual, it goes the monster manual goes further in depth on monsters that you can pick up on and be able to expand your game. So that way like you're not necessarily always running into like orcs or goblins. You can sit here and like run into creatures that like are like more like far-fetched. Like you can picture right here of like a dragon that you can run into. So like expand like the next week, like with going into like the monster manual, I'll talk about like how you expand, using that to expand on your monsters and stuff. So like in the back here, like this third appendix, it gives you like a little like ideas for like dungeons that you can do, and like little maps that you can use for like maybe like a city encounters, or like another like a city to wilderness type of adventure. So like this back gives you kind of like maps that you can use to like maybe get the optional character miniatures, and you can like place them on and like give better visuals for how to run combat or something on like stuff. So this is pretty much like the DM guide. So like I'll reiterate. So like, well, it's not necessary, meaning that it would be like an optional book. It's definitely well worth it if you're going to be like a DM, the dungeon master. So like but if you're like, just like pretty much like one of the player characters, and you're always a player character, you don't necessarily need to get this. But like as like I've DM'd, and like and I'm currently DMing for one of my friends that I just got into like just probably like a couple months ago now. this would be like a perfect pickup, so that like I've mentioned, like you have more options and you have more knowledge on how to run the game, so that way you can maybe you do have like in my example that I'm in, you maybe have a new player that's coming in, so now you have more options and more ideas like with this that you can use to be able to run the game a lot smoother. So this is like I said, considered one of the core rule books, and like what is called like the in a sense the holy trinity of like D&D rule books is the player's handbook, this one right here, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. So those are the three that like are considered like the holy trinity, the core rule books that you want, that most people will say you want to get and everything. So I'll reiterate that you pretty much only need the player's handbook to get to run a campaign. So you can obviously start off with that, and like each one of these runs for like $50 or so. Like you can pick up at like your local gaming store. I mean, of course, if you are the type that like, well, like I don't want to go out, or it's too much of a hassle, and like I'm too busy, I just want to order off an Amazon, then you can do that too. So like I'm big on helping local businesses though. So like that's why I try to go to like the local stores and get books like this from them. So it helps support the local small businesses. So like either way, like as a DM, like after like, you get the player's handbook and maybe you run like a first adventure with that, you pick up this one, and then like you pick up the monster manual. So like those would, as like a dungeon as the dungeon master, would be like perfect to like complement the player's handbook. So like with those three, that would be like perfect for you to get in. Like it could set you up for years of adventuring with just this one game. So like in a sense, like with 3 books, you could end up having 30 years worth of experiences and everything. So like well, like I'll reiterate, while optional, this is definitely worth it for worthwhile buy for people who are going to Dungeon Master.